It's kind of interesting. I am sitting here in front of the post office today, just checking my P.O. box. Because if I don't check it every so often, if someone sends me something, I've got 7 days to test it. So I have to drive from where I am to where the post office is and get it there. Anyway, I went in today and was kind of talking to one of the postal workers that I know there. And he's saying that pretty much, mail and packages and things like that, pretty much the same this time of year that they normally are. And so he hasn't really noticed a difference there. As far as some of the practices and things that they do, that's where the major difference has been for him. So it's kind of interesting to get kind of the take that we may be talking about our healthcare workers, we may be talking about our first responders, we may be talking about things like that. But remember, your postal worker, your package delivery service, your other people that provide the work for you, remember what they're doing to help you make it through this time. Anyway, I wanted to give you guys, today we are on Tom Swift and his submarine boat. Ooh. I always worry when I open and close this book. We are on chapter 8. Sorry, it took me a few seconds. It's VIII, so it takes me a second to look at it. Anyway, we are on chapter 8, another treasure expedition. While Tom and Mr. Damien continued on to Atlantis after the oil, the young inventor lamenting from time to time that his remarks about the real destination of the Advanced had been overheard by Mr. Berg. The latter and his companion were hastening back along the path that ran on one side of the sand dunes. "What's your hurry?" asked Mr. Maxwell, who was the submarine agent. "You turned around as if you were shot when you saw that man and the lad. There didn't appear to be any cause for such a hurry. From what I could hear, they were talking about a submarine. You're in the same business. You might be friends." "Yes, we might," admitted Mr. Berg with a peculiar smile. "But unless I'm very much mistaken, we're going to be rivals." "Rivals? What do you mean?" "I can't tell you now. Perhaps I may later. But if you don't mind, walk a little faster, please. I want to get a long-distance telephone in." "What for?" "I just overheard something that I wish to communicate to my employers, Bentley and Egbert." "Overheard something? I don't see what it could be, unless that lad—" "You'll learn in good time," went on the submarine agent. "But I must telephone at once." A little later, the two men had reached a trolley line that ran into Atlantis, and they arrived at the city before Mr. Damien and Tom got there, as the latter had to go by a circuitous route. Mr. Berg lost no time in calling up his firm by telephone. "I have had another talk with Mr. Swift," he reported to Mr. Bentley, who came to the instrument in Philadelphia. "Well, what does he say?" was the impatient question. "I can't understand his not wanting to try for the government prize. It is astonishing. You said you were going to discover the reason, Mr. Berg, but you haven't done so." "I have." "What is it?" "Well, the reason Mr. Swift and his son don't care for the $50,000 prize is—" that they are after one of $300,000. $300,000? Cried Mr. Bentley. What government is going to offer such a prize as that for submarines, when they are getting almost as common as airships? We ought to try for that ourselves. What government is it? No government at all. But I think we ought to have a try for it, Mr. Bentley. Explain. Well, I have just learned, most accidentally, that the Swifts are going after sunken treasure. $300,000 in gold bullion. Sunken treasure? Where? I don't know exactly, but off the coast of Uruguay. And Mr. Berg rapidly related what he had overheard Tom tell Mr. Damien. Mr. Bentley was much excited and impatient for more details, but his agent could not give them to him. Well, concluded the senior member of the firm of submarine boat builders, if the Swifts are going after treasure, so can we. Come to Philadelphia at once, Mr. Berg, and we'll talk this matter over. There is no time to lose. We can afford to forego the government prize for a chance of getting a much larger one. We have as much right to search for sunken gold as the Swifts have. Come here at once, and we will make our plans. All right, agreed the agent with a smile as he hung up the receiver. I guess, he murmured to himself, that you won't be so high and mighty with me after this, Tom Swift. We'll see who has his best boat after all. We'll have a contest and a competition, but not for a government prize. It will be for sunken gold. It was easy to see that Mr. Berg was much pleased with himself. Meanwhile, Tom and Mr. Damien had reached Atlantis and had purchased the oil. They started back, but Tom took a street leading toward the center of the place instead of striking for the beach path along which they had come. Where are you going? Asked Mr. Damien. I want to see if Andy Fogger has come back here, replied the lad, and he told of having been shut in the tank by the bully. I've never properly punished him for that trick, he went on, though we did manage to burst his auto tires. I'm curious to know how he knew enough to turn that gear and shut the tank door. He must have been loitering near the shop, seen me go in the submarine alone, watched his chance, and sneaked in after me. But I'd like to get a complete explanation. And if I once got hold of Andy, I could make him talk, said Tom, clenched his fist in a manner that argued no good for the squint-eyed lad. He was stopping at the same hotel with Mr. Berg, and he hurried away after the trick he played on me. I next saw him in Shopton, but I thought perhaps he might have come back here. I'm going to inquire at the hotel, he added. Andy's name was not on the register since his hasty flight, however, and Tom, after inquiring from the clerk and learning that Mr. Berg was still a guest at the hostelry, rejoined Mr. Damien. Bless my hat! Exclaimed that eccentric individual as they started back to the lonely beach where the submarine was awaiting their advent into the water. The more I think of the trip I'm going to take, the more I like it. I hope you will, remarked Tom. It will be a new experience for all of us. There's only one thing worrying me, and that is about Mr. Berg having overheard what I said. Oh, don't worry about that. Can't we slip away and leave no trace in the water? I hope so, but I must tell Dad and Mr. Sharp about what happened. The aged inventor was not a little alarmed at what his son related, but he agreed with Mr. Damien, whom he heartily welcomed. That little was to be apprehended from Berg and his employers. They know we're after a sunken wreck, but that is all they do know, said Tom's father. We are only waiting for the arrival of Captain Alden Weston, and then we will go. Even if Bentley and Egbert make a try for the treasure, we'll have the start on them. And this will be a case of first come, first served. Don't worry, Tom. I'm glad you're going, Mr. Damien. Come, I will show you our submarine. As father and son, with their guest, were going to the machine shop, Mr. Sharp met them. He had a letter in his hand. "Good news!" the balloonist cried. "Captain Weston will be with us tomorrow. He will arrive at the beach hotel in Atlantis and wants one of us to meet him there. He has considerable information about the wreck." "The beach hotel," murmured Tom. "That is where Mr. Berg is stopping. I hope he doesn't worm any of our secret from Captain Weston." And it was with a feeling of uneasiness that the young inventor continued after his father and Mr. Damien to where the submarine was. Interesting. So now we've got all these groups ready to go to the submarine. We've got all these two companies now, well, an inventor and a company, that are going to try for the treasure. We've got all this set up. That's going to be very interesting to see how and where this is all going to play out and how it's going to happen. Anyway, I wanted to thank you guys so very much for tuning in today. I hope that you guys are staying happy, healthy, and safe. And you have a wonderful, wonderful, and blessed day.